I'm Nandita Sharma. I'm a professor of sociology at Mānoa and a member of Hawaii J20. On behalf of all of the members of Hawaii J20, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the next installment of our Solidarity series. If I could get all the J20 members to stand up and wave their arms just to make sure that everyone knows how many people it takes to make this happen. Thank you. Another huge thank you is owed to the good people at Harris United Methodist Church, particularly Karen, who is always here with us. Harris has been such an important institution for our movement, and we're really grateful to them. Thanks are also due to our stalwart co-sponsor, Indivisible Hawaii Statewide Network, which continues to do critical work for all of us. And thank you to our sister organizations who join us here tonight to share with you the fabulous work that they're doing and opening up possibilities for all of us to get active in whichever way we feel most able to do. So big shout out to ACLU Hawaii. To the Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights. Yay. Of course, to Indivisible. To 5051 and General Strike. To Refuse Fascism. And to the newest kid on the block, the Oahu Rapid Response Coalition, which many members of J20 and all of the sister organizations here have helped to create and are members of. And of course, thanks is really owed to each and every one of you for being here. The Trump administration is doing everything they can to intimidate us from speaking out and standing up for what we know is right. So it does take a lot of courage and fortitude for us to continue to work against this regime. So thank you for being here. Also, there's about 20 people joining us on live stream. So big shout out to all of those on the neighbor islands who are joining us. So tonight we're going to discuss how to organize against, how to defeat, and how to live after fascism. And so this is a really crucial time for us to gather, to discuss, and importantly, to act. Many of you are probably familiar with the term disaster capitalism, coined by my friend Naomi Klein, right? Disaster capitalism refers to the deliberate strategy of capitalists to exploit chaos for their private profits, right? Capitalists are not the only ones who can strategize. Now is the time for disaster activism. A way for us not to exploit chaos, but to understand it so we can end it. Not for private profit, but for common good. So we are part of disaster activism. We are mobilized and we are going to defeat Trump. Given the obvious and horrendous violence of Trump and his coterie of bootlickers, we have the opportunity to organize ourselves into a political force that can bring about a world built by us on the principles that no one can be exploited, no one can be denigrated, a world in which land cannot be stolen and turned into private property or nation-state territory, a world in which no one can be excluded. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. How do we defeat Trump and Trumpism? And how do we build a world in which fascists can never rear their ugly heads again? This is important because simply defeating an authoritarian is not enough. It's good, and we need to do that, and we still have a long ways to go, but it's not enough. Now, we all celebrated the electoral defeat of Viktor Orban, right? Yes. Fascist and darling of Trumpism. No doubt this was a necessary defeat and certainly a victory. However, it's not enough. The man who defeated him, Peter Magyar, is part of the right that brought Orban to power and that kept him there. This is particularly evident on the issue of immigration, the issue that fuels and sustains the far right around the world. But also, and this is critical, anti-immigration is also the defining feature of the current world order of nation states. Like Orban, Peter Magyar in Hungary says he will continue to take a, quote, very strict stance on illegal immigration and, quote, protect Hungary's national culture. So what's wrong with being against illegal immigration and protecting national culture, you might be thinking? Isn't this just normal and certainly the rhetoric of most world leaders, not only authoritarians, but also the so-called Democrats alike? Yes, it is, and that's the problem. One of the biggest mistakes that we made in Hawaii J20 was to disband when Trump 1.0 ended and Biden was elected. Biden, of course, was much better than Trump on many, many issues, but Biden's continued scapegoating of migrants laid the ground for the rise of fascism in the United States. And here we are, back with Trump, whose key defining issue is the scapegoating of immigrants. We really need to deal with the hatred that citizens are encouraged to direct at migrants in nation states across the world. We need to deal with the fact that while fascists certainly make anti-immigration their central platform, liberals do not denounce anti-immigrant politics, but maintain them through a rhetoric of securing the border. Clinton did that, Obama did that, and so did Biden. Trump built on that foundation to call for the, quote, complete and total shutdown of the immigration of anyone who didn't fit his white supremacist worldview. And as of early 2026, the US has full or partial bans on the nationals of over 30 nation states. Effective January 21, 26, the State Department has placed a visa freeze on nationals from 75 nation states. Which people are targeted? Primarily those from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. Under Trump, immigration policy is a direct tool of racist engineering of the US population. But, and this is the issue, it always has been. The stark fact is that all immigration policies are racist. Some might be as brutally clear as the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was one of the first immigration acts of the United States, or Trump's Muslim ban during 1.0. But it's also true when such obvious racist policies are not in place. Racism is a part of the everyday operations of immigration controls. It is a simple and brutal fact that the only way for most people from most places in the world, from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, to enter the United States, under Clinton, Obama, Biden, or Trump, is to enter either as an indentured migrant worker or without official permission and be labeled, quote unquote, an illegal. That's the facts. Trump's immigration policies are a form of the proverbial chickens coming home to roost. As we allowed Clinton, Obama, and Biden to continue with their got to secure the border rhetoric, we paved the way for Trump to swoop in and own the issue. Fascists always win the battle over who is going to be tougher on the border. Fascists always have no problem saying that they will actively hunt down migrants or separate families. Fascists have no problems denying edible food, potable water, needed medicines, or beds to migrants. Fascists have no problem saying they will build camps to indefinitely detain migrants. Fascists have no problem saying that the entire racialized groups of people don't belong in the nation and strip them of their citizenship. And as history tells us, fascists have absolutely no problems killing migrants and those citizens who stand with them against the state. So we need to tackle anti-immigration politics head on to ensure that we can build a world where no one truly can be not excluded, and a world in which we all belong. A world without anti-immigrant politics is a world where fascism cannot exist. It is, of course, more complicated than that, but a world without anti-immigrant politics is a world that has also addressed the long list of the ways we've been divided from one another. So tonight, we're here to start the hard work of coming together to organize to defeat fascism and to live in a world where it becomes impossible to scapegoat some people just so that a small band of robber barons can take everything from us. So before we start with the speakers, we have a short video to show you from Hawaii J20's team that produces stories from Hawaii.
Harris United Methodist Church has a long history of supporting social justice and our immigrant neighbors. We actually started our sanctuary ministry team in 2017 in response to the first Trump administration. So we've been supporting immigrants in sort of physical ways, providing plane tickets for Neighbor Island once we need to come here for their immigration hearings, lodging, sometimes in our church apartment, or we'll even put them up in a hotel so they can get to their early morning ICE appointments on time. We just set up a kokua closet here on campus. If a pro bono attorney or other social service provider has a client who needs things like clothes, personal toiletries, we have some gift cards. Auntie Wally's here. Did I miss anything? That kind of stuff? Yeah, so upon referral, they can call our church office and we can open up the closet and provide those sort of necessities for immigrant neighbors who might have, might need that kind of stuff because they are not working or something like that. We also have these Know Your Rights cards on the registration table in 19 different languages. So please take some if you know people who need to know their rights. And finally, we'd like to start setting up more mutual aid like the Kokua Closet. So I'm going to make a form in the back. If anyone's interested in helping us with things like, bringing groceries to people who are afraid to leave their house, with more of these rides to and from the airport, that kind of stuff. I'll have a sign-up sheet, and we're still trying to figure it out, but I'll get to you eventually. And we're just so happy to host important events like this one, because as I said, this is the history of our church. We are a social justice-oriented church.
That, of course, is Nicole Wu, who's the head of the sanctuary ministry at Harris United Methodist Church. So it's my immense pleasure to invite you to hear from two people who have thought a lot about how we can undo the divisions that keep us apart and done a lot of work to bring about a world that we can all share equally in. We'll start with Gaye Chan, who, in addition to being a member of J20, is also one of the key forces behind the formation of the Oahu Rapid Response Coalition. She's also a professor emerita of the University of Hawai'i at Mānoa, a prolific and recognized artist, and also helped to start the project called Eating in Public, whose work she will talk about to give us the necessary tools to start rebuilding our world. So, Gaye?
Nandita and I have been started this project in 2003. This is a long time ago. It's 23 years ago. So artists usually take a few years, maybe a few days to make something. It's really exhausting to do the same project for 23 years, and it's still going, and probably till the day I die. This project started accidentally, and we used to live in Kailua, in an area called Keolu Hills. We rented a studio apartment about someone's garage. It started accidentally. I'm going to tell you the story how it started. But during the process, we came up with a motto for this project that we named Eating in Public. And the reason why it's called Eating in Public is because there's nothing to eat there at all. So we're trying to figure out how we can eat in public all this time. So the motto is, take, leave, whatevers. Take to act without shame, leave, to share without condition, and whatever's, to trust without apology. And so we've been using this as a guiding principle to act. So this is 7 pieces of property from our house. If you know Kailua, if you know Keolu Hills, it's a fetid, polluted lake with homes surrounding it. So there's this little piece of land there that is mostly fenced off, but there's a strip that's maybe 6 feet wide where people let their dogs pee and it's just full of weeds. So I was learning gardening at the time, learning how to compost, and I didn't know that when you throw your papaya seeds in the composter, you get 5,000 papaya plants. So I'm like, oh yeah, what am I going to do with these plants? I can't just throw them away. So we decided that we were going to plant them on the strip. We did this just unthinking, thinking we'd use these plants, and we put up a sign. I'm just going to read it in the voice of the sign. These papaya plants have been planted here for everyone. When they bear fruit, in about a year, you're welcome to pick them as you need, or return to feed the plants with organic fertilizer once a month. Please feel free to water and weed. Do not use chemical weed killers, as this will poison the fruit and those who eat them. Sign, the Diggers. Who are the Diggers? The Diggers lived in a place that we now know as England in the 16th century. They were commoners. They used the common land to survive, everything. The food, the water, to graze their sheep, to make their shoes, for their medicine, for their clothes, everything, everything. This was a period when that was the beginning of capitalism as well. So what they did was, this is a period of the Great Enclosure, meaning that they took the commons from the commoners, prevented them from using it for their survival, and this was a strategy to turn them into workers for capitalism. Diggers are one of these very unhappy people who now don't have access to their commons, and their form of resistance is through digging. The enclosures, they planted hedges around the common land. They dug up their hedges. They dug up their fences. They also dug to plant food, carrots, parsnips, beans. So in a sense, what we're doing in Kailua was continuing the diggers' work by planting papayas on our common land and reclaiming that strip of dog piss, piece of fallow space, as all of ours, not just ours, for anyone to take the papayas. We're not just doing what the diggers did, we are claiming that we are diggers, and we're continuing the same project. We're continuing to dig for our commons back. Go ahead. So in about a year, the papayas grew. Let me tell you a little bit about that space. Where Keolu Hills and the lake is, was a thriving space of the commons where people could get fish, grow crops, find their homes. Here's a picture from 1958. And here's another photograph. It's less than 10 years later, when it was renamed, Ka'elepulu was renamed Enchanted Lake, as it progressively got more polluted. So we're going to talk about the politics of naming forever, but we won't. The lake is polluted, is full of trash, and then it's owned by the people who live bordering the land, so their privilege is to kayak there and to drag out the trash. So somewhere around this time, we got a sign that was written on our sign that says, we need you to move these plants. So we'll come back in a month, so please move these plants where they can grow. So we're like, we don't know where to put this plant. So we wrote back another sign that says, well, we don't know where to put these plants because it's so convenient for people to have papayas. 1 month later, a bunch of work people came. They dug up the papaya plants. They took the fence and they moved it right over the papaya plants. So now that the strip is only 3 feet wide. And we're like, what was that all about? Now, the interesting thing is that people are always walking their dogs, jogging along around Keolu Drive. So everyone saw the exchange on the signs between these people. So when they took down the papaya plants, people were like, oh, that's terrible. How dare they do something so mean to these people that just planted papayas? So this is a great David and Goliath story because now people were mad and they helped us expand the garden. But what's interesting is that we knew from the garden, we planted basils, beans, lilikoi, more papaya, lots of stuff, is that a lot of people that grew up in a space like I did don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to harvest, they don't know how to cook, so then we had to make labels for everything. We even put sticks where you put recipes. I even tied clippers so that people don't rip out the whole plant. Sometimes people would rip out the whole branch for chili peppers. And we put up more signs, inviting people to join us. Agitprop, meaning to impersonate the people of authority, but to say something that wouldn't say. So the left one is the real one, and ours is the one on the right. So this went on for a while, but it was very frustrating. People didn't know how to harvest and cook and stuff. And so we got another idea. When Nandita was in Vancouver, as a little girl, she was a very impoverished family. There was a free store run by hippies a few doors down, and she loved the free store because that's the only place she could shop. And she just, with relish, remembers these white go-go boots that she found one day. They were way too big. So with this memory, we started researching free stores. And there have been free stores that call themselves made by diggers throughout the ages. This one is in New York, I think. There were ones in San Francisco. So we said, let's make one. So we did it in front of our rental property. And we decided the first thing that we would give away were papaya plants, because we have so many. Now, Kailua is kind of an uptightish, militarized neighborhood, right? So we didn't know anybody. They didn't talk to us. But we put up the free store. And then everyone stopped and talked to these crazy people at the free store. And then they, not just these very proper, polite, well-mannered people would take stuff without asking and leave stuff. And signage was always a thing that we used to communicate the project. We're very clear, under the free store, it says this is an anarchist, anti-capitalist project. But people joined in anyway. So what we're doing, kind of just by experiment, is to create a space where people can experiment what it's like to live in, where there's a free space that they could do what they want and experiment without the intrusion of money or some kind of property owner. Some people insisted on leaving money anyway. So I made this box. And people left money, and other people took money. It was never empty. Sometimes in the morning it would be $1.12, and then in the afternoon it would be 2-something, and then it would be 12 cents. I don't know, it kept changing. This is an idea that was inspired by the San Francisco diggers, who suggested that people gave them money so that they could redistribute them. There have been many free stores since then. The most successful one was at the University of Hawai'i art building. It was, in fact, was so successful that it became part of the campus tour that they held 3 times a day. We found frozen chicken there. So we were like, oh my God, what to do with the frozen chicken? So we had to start a free fridge. This is the first free fridge. We have had many free fridges because the free fridges, there was a linguistic confusion. So some people thought the fridge was free instead of Okay. So this is the most recent free store in front of our house in Kaneohe. And who got the table from the free store? Just last week or something. Happy customer. So we're now at about 30 free stores on Oahu. And I think that some of you have shopped there, quote unquote, shopped there without knowing this is part of the Eating in Public. Many of the free stores also have seed sharing stations. They're stocked by people who grow plants and save their seeds. It's part of the project. Like if you don't have seeds, you don't get nothing. You're going to starve. So it's teaching people, teaching us how to save seeds and share seeds. I'm going to talk about one more project, Digger's Dinner. I think I see a couple of people have come to one of these. Digger's Dinners are exercises in radical sharing of food and of knowledge. They can take place in small settings amongst friends or in public and open to all. In this case, the Digger's Dinner took place at a public university in Hawaii and was preceded by 2 weeks of demonstrations and performances centered around self-sufficiency. Examples included how to sharpen knives, clean fish, make chopsticks, simultaneous demonstrations on making kimchi and sauerkraut. The culminating event is a potluck that was open to all with only one rule. Each participant's contribution must be primarily made from ingredients that they have either grown, hunted, fished, foraged, bartered, gleaned, gifted, or stolen. At the start of the dinner, all participants are invited to explain the story of their ingredients. All leftovers were freely distributed the next day. So we just did one last week, hosted by Fish Cake in Kaka'ako. It's a great success, incredible food. Before the Digger's Dinner, we had about 1 or 2 weeks, I can't remember. There were lots of demonstrations or skill sharing of things that have to do with survival. And so this is, the first one is just how to hammer nails, because most of us don't know how to hold that hammer properly now. How to make your own chopsticks, next. How to make sauerkraut and kimchi. I did it at the same time so that we de-emphasize cultural identity and ethnicity, but really about fermentation. Next. We collected all the stuff that you have in your cabinet that you've been saving because you can't bear throwing it away, so that we can have dishes during the dinner. Next. And because Hawaii is such a small art town, somehow we ended up with a whole full-page spread and on a banner on the headline, like the front page. Very strange. Just a few pictures of the dinner. So there's Bridget. So at the beginning of the dinner, it's not just the food, but people tell the story of how the food come to be, right? So how did they make the chili? Who grew the beans? Who made the salt, right? So the stories are really important. Sometimes the food is not so good, but sometimes the stories are great. But most of the time, the stories are good. You know, like, oh, I stole this from my roommate. Very funny. So this was a huge dinner because we ended up on the front page news for some reason. So we had hundreds of people show up. And so the line was really long. It took forever. People were getting exhausted by the stories because it just went on and on and on. And so finally, you guys stay at this one. Finally, this very small woman, she must have been in her 90s or something, she comes to the microphone. We had to get something for her to step on. And she's like, I saw this on the front page, and I've been waiting for this all my life. And so I went to the store and I stole some apples. And then I went to the next store and I stole some bananas. She just sat back down and ate her food and our food. So I want to just leave it with this because I think the whole project is about just seeing what happens, right? Because I don't know how to live outside of the nation-state system or or capitalism. So now I've been doing it for 23 years. I'm much better at it. So I invite all of you to come to the free stores, join in our projects. I also invite you to start your own free stores. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaye. We're going to show our next video from the Stories of Hawaii project.
So I remember waking up very early in the morning, getting a text from folks in Washington, from organizations who are helping Filipino migrant back then. His name is Gaye Chan. He is a 37-year-old who's been detained for months already at that time. They were asking if I could write a medical testimony. So yeah, I reviewed his medical records, and then I saw how bad Gaye was treated by ICE at the detention center. There's been a good amount of evidence how the health of migrants are really neglected. We can see it, 2025 was the deadliest year for the migrants, and that really matched the rise of people detained, more and more people getting detained by ICE. What happened is when he was arrested and detained, apparently his health deteriorated. They found out that he has severe ulcerative colitis. Absolutely, it started in a detention center, just not being treated. It's a serious medical condition. People could die. By the time that he was in the hospital, he was also having infection of his toe. He needed amputation of his toe. So I wrote that letter. I urged a couple of medical doctors too that I know to do the same thing that I did. We were able to come up with those medical testimonies and letters, and then we sent it to the organization supporting Gaye. They sent it to Philippine Airlines and even the Philippine government, and say like we should stop the deportation. They could potentially die even during the flight. Later on, he was taken off the flight. I think that was a really good proof of what the medical community can do in supporting migrants. I was just exploring like what are the ways that I could really urge the community, especially my patients, to speak up or at least let me know. So I thought about writing in a report in my waiting room in the clinic, saying, "Dear patients, I want you to trust me, share with me," because I wouldn't know how to help them if they don't tell me. And I know this situation with the ICE arrest and deportation and rape can be very scary. So in general, I think they're seeing me as someone that they can go to. And they're also empowered, like in case something happens, they know what to do.
So that's our very own Dr. RC from Hawaii J20 and ORRC. Dr. RC has been with us since Trump 1.0, and she's amazing, as you can see. In regards to the Stories of Hawaii project, it's really important for us to build a archive of stories that can be shared and can document how people are helping one another, because that archive of solidarity is actually a really empowering and important one so that people don't feel alone and isolated. So if you have stories to share with us, please talk to one of the J20 people after the event. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Bridget Anderson, who was at that Diggers Dinner a dozen years ago here in Hawaii. Bridget is currently the Director of Migration Mobilities Bristol and Professor of Migration, Mobilities, and Citizenship at the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom. Starting this summer, she will be the inaugural director of the Migrant Futures Institute, which is housed at Goldsmiths University in London. Bridget is a longtime activist and feminist and No Borders movement, so please join me in welcoming Bridget Anderson.
Thanks so much. Thanks for inviting me. I never tire of hearing about the origins of eating in public and how it keeps going. It's just so fun, and I think you can see also just being here in Hawaii, looking at the stories from Hawaii, how care is like it's tough and it's imaginative and it's creative and it's just energizing. So really, thanks ever so much. And I don't know whether you know, but 24th of April is a big Diggers' Day because it's the day of the end of the occupation of St. George's Hill, which was the major diggers' occupation that was destroyed by the forces of Oliver Cromwell. So it seems very appropriate to be talking about them today. So it's kind of weird thinking, so I'm from the UK and I'm going to be talking quite a lot now about history without any nice pictures, sorry. But I think that history really matters when we're thinking about the future. And I think that one of the things that fascism does is it presents myths as history, and that presents the logic of myths as therefore motivating motivating particular kinds of politics. So I think that actually understanding our histories and looking for new kinds of connections within those histories is actually politically a very important thing to do, especially when we're thinking about migration. So what we're seeing is that migration has become really politically charged all across the world, and it's routinely now invoked as a cause for crime, social disorder, fragmentation, overstretched public services, housing shortages, you name it, it's caused by migration. And it's an obsession that persists in the face of the facts. And I think this is one issue that certainly academics have, is that they think that if you just tell people the facts, then everything else will follow. But you can tell people the facts till they're blue in the face, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that migrants are more likely to be the victims and the perpetrators of crime, or that they're probably working in poorly paid work that is essential to keep our lives running. So we can offer those facts till we're blue in the face. The superficial explanation that national publics don't understand the role of immigration in national economies doesn't explain the role of immigration, why migration has become such a powerful and legitimized site for kind of articulating certain kinds of emotions, nor why it's being so actively mobilized today. So I think to understand what's going on, we need to stop treating migration as a standalone problem and challenge the assumption that migrants and citizens have fundamentally competing and different interests, and talk about the role of nationalism in our politics. And when we do this, it becomes clear that contemporary anti-migrant politics are a profound attack on all of us. So I want to start by situating the contemporary obsession with migration within a much longer history of how labour, mobility and belonging have been governed. Seen this way, today's migrant is the latest incarnation of a much older political figure, the masterless, mobile labourer. So long before the emergence of modern immigration controls, and even before contemporary nation-states were formed across Europe, kings and rulers were deeply concerned with controlling the mobility of the ruled. So in medieval and early modern England, the key problem wasn't the foreigner, but the vagrant, the person who moved without permission, without the master, free of the estate, and without a recognised place in the social hierarchy. From the 14th century onwards, a series of vagrancy and labour statutes were designed to prevent labourers from using movement to demand higher wages or to escape harsh conditions. Passport documents, and they were actually called passports, were used to regulate their movement. So long before passports were associated with national citizenship, if you were a labourer and you wanted to leave your master, the feudal estate where you were situated, you had to have a document with the king's seal to be able to move from one village to another. And if you didn't have that document, you could be picked up and compelled to work by any landed estate owner. And actually, by the middle of the 15th century, there were a lot of fake documents going about. It costs, and you could get better or worse ones. Worse ones were cheaper, better ones were more expensive. So vagrants were, as I say, masterless men. So they didn't have fixed ties and they didn't have a recognized position. So what was concerning was not simply movement, but movement without mastery. So vagrancy was a crime of status. So it wasn't something that you did that meant you could be criminalized, that you could be at first compelled to labor and later that you could be put in prison. The vagrant was criminalized not for specific actions, but for being unattached and moving without the master's permission. So this was a refusal to know their place, either literally or metaphorically. Vagrants were associated with disorder, immorality, disease, and sedition, and punishment ranged from forced labor and whipping to expulsion and at times death. So like today's immigrant, the vagrant embodied a broader fear that uncontrolled movement by laborers was a threat to the wealthy and would undermine social hierarchy. Early vagrancy didn't just punish movement, they also criminalized certain forms of care. Giving alms to valiant beggars, which were able-bodied people who were able to work, was also punishable. So there was a distinction between the deserving and the undeserving poor, which had its roots in early Christian thought, but from the 12th century onwards, prompted authorities across Europe to formalize distinctions, regulating begging and privileging local, known, and morally righteous recipients of aids. During the Reformation and early modern period, deservingness was systematized and embedded in law, culminating in the poor laws of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, which made access to relief conditional on work, moral behavior, and local belonging. Relief was provided by parishes to their own poor. People who were not registered in the parish and who fell out of work would be expelled, as there would be likely to be a charge on the parish. Pregnant women were particularly dangerous, as if their baby was born in the parish, the baby would be eligible for poor relief. Wealthy parishes were worried that people would come to them and even give birth there, so they would be eligible for relief, and strong efforts would be made to remove pregnant women. So all of this, I think, is actually very familiar today, and we have forgotten that this is actually part of a very long history. So the figure of the vagrant developed over time to other moralized figures. You had the pauper, the benefit scrounger, the welfare queen, the panhandler. All of these different types of people are controlled in different ways. In Europe, it's often through welfare state law, which can both restrict and compel movement within the country. But these, despite their shared history, these kinds of figures, stereotyped figures, are kept separate from the migrant, because we've been trained to imagine citizens and migrants as being totally different. But as I hope you're hearing, I'm suggesting, actually the origins of the control of movement continue today and actually are shared by both citizens and migrants alike. And both migrants and vagrants were and are forms of folk devil. So what's a folk devil? A folk devil is a recognizable figure constructed as a threat to the social order and blamed for a range of social anxieties. So they're usually portrayed as morally degenerate, dangerous, and contagious. But crucially, they're not just despised groups, but are figures onto whom societies project diffuse anxieties. They're types used to produce moral panics which justify intensified policing, punishment, and powers. But these moral panics, although they're presented as spontaneous outbreaks of fear, which then authorities must then respond to, are actually actively produced and amplified by states, and today the media and political actors, who transform everyday anxieties into urgent threats. And the parallels between the migrant and the vagrant are not just about stereotypes. Crucially, the vagrant and the migrant are not just moralized figures, but also legal figures. Techniques now associated with border control, like documentation, surveillance, forced movement, and expulsion, were first developed to govern subjects. Today, immigration law provides the language, categories, and bureaucratic authority through which moral judgments can be presented as neutral administration, but in previous time it was vagrancy and poor laws. So immigration law is all about sorting acceptable, productive, and controllable mobility from dangerous, disorderly, and excessive mobility. They don't just regulate movement as such, but they regulate the movement of the global working class. This is why contemporary migration debates focus obsessively on so-called low-skilled workers and criminality, while the mobility of professionals, investors, executives, and tourists passes largely without comment. The migrant of the popular imagination, the migrant of the political imagination, isn't the investor or the business traveller, it's the cleaner, farm worker, and asylum seeker. So quite often you see that when people, when people want to, say a middle-class person wants to marry somebody and then they find that immigration controls get in the way, they're really shocked. It's like, but this shouldn't be happening to me, because there's this kind of almost embodied knowledge that actually immigration controls are really about controlling the movement of workers. So by thinking about vagrancy, I want to suggest that mobility controls are not a marginal or reactive feature of global capitalism, but absolutely central to its operation. Immigration and citizenship laws are ways of race and class making without ever actually using those words, race and class. Instead, we use migrant or immigrant. What do I mean by this? Well, it's much easier to move for a start if you have the citizenship of a country which has a high GDP. So what do you do if you are a citizen of a country that has a lower GDP, but actually you're wealthy? Well, you can buy a passport. Every year, the wealth management firm Henley & Partners publishes the Henley Passport Index, which ranks all of the world's passports according to the number of visa-free destinations that holders have access to. And the purpose of this is, as I say, to market their citizenship by investment, services to wealthy people saddled with low-ranking passports. In a less spectacular way, people who are not high net worth individuals, but who have social, economic, and cultural capital, can take advantage of migration routes open to the so-called highly skilled. Skill is a key variable governing access to movement, and immigration controls often facilitate entry for the well-paid so-called brightest and best, with far more restrictions pre- and post-entry for the so-called low skills. So for low-skilled people, visas are typically tied to sponsors and temporary. Although it's very important for both immigration and labour markets, though, it's actually surprisingly difficult to define skill. And actually, in fact, as I'm sure you all know, work that's designated low skill is often very complex, demanding, and important. So skill, in fact, operates less as a neutral measure of capacity than as a proxy for social, economic, and cultural capital. And it's also a proxy for racialized value. But it's very important for the legitimacy of immigration and citizenship regimes that they are not racist. International institutions often seek to distinguish xenophobia, that is, the fear of the stranger, from racism. And often when they do this, so when I say international organizations, I mean organizations like the United Nations, the OECD, the International Organization for Migration, those kind of big groups. So they distinguish between racism and hostility from migrants precisely to differentiate between racism and hate crimes against migrants, even at the same time as they note that the outcomes, and I quote, can be identical. This is reflected as well in national level discourse, and typically only certain kinds of anti-migration sentiment are held to be racist, as Nandita was talking about. That's largely if they're expressed in physical or verbal violence and or are associated with the far right. Mainstream anti-migration sentiment is often represented as an expression of legitimate concern and treated as quite a different phenomenon from racism. And this highlights, I think, that while racism is widely acknowledged as a political and social evil across the world, what racism means and how it can be recognised is in practice highly disputed. So immigration laws are not racist, but they are unashamedly nationalist. And nationalist logic provides the legal and moral scaffolding to distinguish hostility to immigration from racism, allegedly. So what does it mean to belong to a nation? To belong to a nation is to stake a claim to a shared history, and here's where this idea of the myths of history become very important to contemporary politics, is to stake a claim to a shared history, a shared ancestry, and a shared culture. As Etienne Balibar argues, contemporary nationalism often takes the form of racism without race, where cultural identity becomes a proxy for racial hierarchy. The nation is imagined as possessing a core cultural essence. Membership is policed through markers of ancestry and cultural compatibility, and groups can be deemed incapable of belonging because they threaten an imagined homogeneity. Racism in this formulation doesn't need to explicitly invoke biological superiority, but embeds itself in common sense appeals to patriotism and cultural preservation, allowing societies to draw sharp boundaries between insiders and outsiders, including promoting ideas of being the best country in the world at the same time as publicly disavowing racism. So differentiating on the grounds of nationality, of belonging to the nation, is treated as fundamentally different from differentiating on the grounds of race. And this is partly because of nationality's association with citizenship, which is a legal status. So it's actually not only legal, but often required that you discriminate on the grounds of citizenship. But nationality is deeply ambiguous and can describe also belonging to a national people. So when we talk about nationality, are we talking about citizenship, a legal status, or are we talking about belonging to a national people? And this gap between citizenship and belonging to a national people means that you can possess citizenship and still not be regarded as a bona fide member of the nation. And this is manifest in everyday assumptions. So a few months back, there was a big debate in the UK because over whether Rishi Sunak, who was our Prime Minister, whether he could be English because he was, and I quote, as a brown-skinned Hindu, he could not possibly be English. He could be British, he had British citizenship, that wasn't denied. What was up for dispute was whether he could be English, that is, a member of the English nation. So this migration obsession is shaped by historically and colonially produced ideas of national identity that continue to operate through ideas of ancestry, culture, and belonging, and that are given additional potency by fears of scarcity. And I want to just do a quick shout out to Nandita's book, Home Rule, which I think really kind of lays out historically this process. And I think importantly, as we see in Nandita's book and in other work, it's not this process isn't confined to North America and Europe, which are the regions that are usually associated with the diagnosis of racism. Across the world, states with very different political systems articulate national belonging through ideas of cultural essence, indigeneity, and civilizational hierarchy. So in Japan and South Korea, for instance, migration restrictions have historically been justified through appeals to ethnic homogeneity and the cultural specificity of the national community. In the Dominican Republic, citizens of Haitian descent, including those born in the country, are treated as foreigners or in transit, a practice that has been identified as part of a broader system in which migration distinctions become a pretext for racist discrimination. So each area of the world has its own contingencies and historical specificities, but it's these everyday nationalist assumptions that make hostility to migration feel like common sense. This is how contemporary anti-migration politics so often insists that it's not racist. Immigration control is framed as a matter of law, order, and national sovereignty. Nationalism, rather than racism, provides the moral justification. We're not against people, we're not racist, the argument goes, we're just enforcing the rules. So if nationalism provides the cultural and moral language through which exclusion can be disavowed as not racist, citizenship is the legal mechanism through which that exclusion is operationalized. Citizenship appears to offer a clear and formal boundary between insiders and outsiders, transforming contested claims about history and culture and belonging into questions of lawful entitlement. By framing inequality, insecurity, and exploitation as consequences of legal status rather than structural conditions, citizenship naturalizes hierarchies of value while presenting them as neutral and fair. Citizenship shifts the question from why social protections and rights are scarce or work is degraded to who is entitled to what kind of work. In this way, nationalism's cultural boundary making is stabilized and enforced through citizenship, allowing judgments about deservingness, that old chestnut that we got from the 12th century, to be translated into administrative distinctions between migrants and citizens. This distinction that now organizes labor markets, welfare systems, and everyday expectations of who should be protected and who can be made to bear risk. So citizenship appears as a shield and migration as a threat. The binary migrant-citizen creates what can be called fantasy citizenship, the belief that citizenship guarantees equal rights, secure belonging, and protection from state power. But it doesn't, and citizenship is deeply internally divided. For example, racialized citizens are disproportionately subjected to document checks, surveillance, and suspicion. Formerly incarcerated people lose civic rights. Welfare recipients and workers are disciplined through work requirements and mobility mandates. Indigenous peoples, territorial minorities, and colonial subjects continue to experience second-class citizenship. We can see that the same logics used to govern and discipline migrants increasingly organize the lives of citizens: workfare, mobility requirements, surveillance, and moral judgment. The banal citizen, which I contrast with the fantasy citizen, is insecure, low-waged, racialized, disabled, and unemployed, and not fully protected by formal membership. Under certain conditions, citizens too are required to move from work, prevented from moving for welfare, policed as out of place, or treated as suspects in their own neighbourhoods. They can even be called migrants. So in the UK, the Localism Act has given considerable power to local authorities to decide who's eligible for social housing. And so the local authorities each one has produced a social housing allocation policy so social housing in the UK, as in the US, is very, very scarce. So they produced this social housing allocation policy, and they have kind of requirements before you can be allowed on the waiting list. So if you're a migrant, they complain in these social housing allocation policies a lot about migrants, about they're bringing crime, about how they just come here because they want to be by the sea and take advantage of our generous policies, all this kind of thing. But actually, when they say migrants, they mean anyone who's crossed a local authority boundary. That is mostly going to be British citizens. So all of the hostility that's directed and sort of encapsulated by the terminology migrant is being brought to bear against citizens, and indeed those very citizens that immigration controls are supposedly there to protect. And so for these migrants to become eligible for social housing, it's really interesting. They have to follow certain conditions. And these conditions vary from authority to authority, but they can include, that you have to be resident for a certain number of years, maybe 10 years before you even get onto the waiting list, but also that you undertake certain requirements, like if you're unemployed, that you do X number of hours of voluntary work in the local community, or even if you're overweight, that you go to the gym. So they have these you have to give up smoking. So these are really very onerous requirements, and actually many of them mirror the requirements for naturalization, in that you have to prove that you're a good citizen. You have to show that you have the right kinds of values. And I think that this is not a failure of citizenship so much as a feature of how capitalism operates through the nation state. And migration regimes and welfare regimes are not separate systems. They are different but connected ways of managing labour, legitimising inequality, and deflecting responsibility away from structural conditions and onto populations who can be morally scrutinised. So seen in this light, the migrant is not simply excluded from citizenship. The migrant is the figure through which the erosion and the conditionality of citizenship are normalised. Vulnerabilities imposed on migrants become thinkable and transferable. Anti-migrant politics is not a distortion of democracy or a misrecognition of national interest, but a strategy for governing inequality in an era of profound social and ecological crisis. By framing migration as a threat, states can obscure their reliance on exploited labour while reasserting moral authority. By pitting migrants and citizens against one another, they forestall solidarities that might challenge the conditions producing precarity for all of us. Anti-migrant politics is not about protecting citizens, but about disciplining all of us and reinforcing hierarchies of deservingness. The migrant-citizen divide distracts from the fact that citizenship is not and never has delivered. We need to reframe the political terrain to show how migrant justice is not a special issue or a niche concern, but is inseparable from broader struggles over work, welfare, racial justice, and state power. So the long history of vagrancy shows us that mobility is normal, it's just part of living, but that it has always unsettled political authority. And political authority has repeatedly responded by criminalising, moralising, and dividing us around movement. Migrants today are part of a longer story. But still, why this relentless focus on migrants in our contemporary politics? The legitimacy of the modern state rests on the idea of a unified nation, an imagined political community that must be continually reproduced to sustain political authority. But the economic, environmental, and geopolitical disruptions of recent decades have made this unity increasingly difficult to sustain. The nation-state form itself compounds multiple crises, including deepening inequality, war, and climate catastrophe, even as it lacks the capacity to address them. Under these conditions, states must work ever harder to provide the ideological glue that is supposed to bind ordinary people into an imagined community. Casting migration as an existential threat enables the nation-state form to reassert itself as the indispensable guardian of security, identity, and social order, and manufacture a sense of collective vulnerability that only national borders and national governments are imagined as being able to alleviate. As the inadequate foundations of national belonging are exposed, states increasingly turn to migration crisis narratives as a way of shoring up their relevance and authority. In this way, migration becomes the stage upon which the nation-state performs its continuing necessity, even as the forces that most profoundly undermine its legitimacy, inequality, climate breakdown, democratic erosion, and global interdependence, remain largely unaddressed. Contemporary nation-states depend on fixity, but this fixity is constantly undone by the chains of movement and interdependence that sustain everyday life. Movement not only of people, but of ideas, goods, and the more than human. Migration provides a strong vantage point from which to organise and to understand the limits and contradictions of the nation-state form and its underlying logics of coloniality, racialisation, and economic extraction. Recognising that movement is the condition of our world opens political possibilities. Movement is ordinary, and the political challenge is not how to stop it, but how to organise our lives around mutual interdependence rather than exclusion. And migration is not a threat, but an opportunity to reimagine belonging, labour, responsibility, justice, and build on interconnections on a planet that is made by circulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bridget. When we were thinking about how to organize our next Solidarity series, we really wanted to address two things that are presented to us as a conundrum, right? One, why do all administrations, regardless of the political party, whether they're Democratic or Republican, engage in immigration bashing, right? That's something that we need to deal with. Why was Obama the deporter-in-chief? How do we deal with that as we're fighting Trump and the horrors that are being that people classified as migrants are being subjected to, and citizens who are standing up with migrants are being killed for. So we cannot just continue to ignore that as we are moving forward in defeating Trump, right? Because what comes after Trump is going to be really important, and now is the time to make sure that we don't get just another Biden, that we get something that is actually going to move us forward in being able to live with one another without having to find a new scapegoat to blame for all of our problems. And that's the other thing. The other conundrum that we're never really asked to deal with is why all citizens can't live the kind of lives that are promised to them. Why are there poor people why are there US citizens who live in abject poverty? Why are there US citizens who have no health care, right? Why are there US citizens that have no housing, right? Why are there US citizens that we allow to live on the side of a road and we don't even, we see them, they look like they're dead and we just walk on by? Why is that? What is happening here? Why are promises that are given to citizens always like this dream that we're chasing rather than the reality? So we got these two things that we need to deal with, right? All US administrations and every other nation state in the world, all of these administrations do essentially same things. And so I think what we were thinking of at J20 when we were organizing this panel was both to have those issues on the table. Because when we're organizing against Trump, it's not just this administration, it's not just the man, right? It's not even just his, hardcore MAGA supporters. It's an entire system and structure that makes this possible, administration after administration, right? And each one gets worse, right? And then also, how do we organize a world in which having a home, having your needs met, having health care, having food are not dreams, but something that all of us actually enjoy? How do we do that? And then I guess the larger question that I think Bridget especially addressed is, who is this we that deserves homes and houses and health care? Is it just people that live in the boundaries of the territories of the United States, or whatever boundary we're talking about? Or is it, do we actually live in a common world, or don't we, right? And I'm really struck, I know this is really hokey, but I'm really struck by the Artemis astronauts. And it's really telling that astronaut after astronaut after astronaut, anyone who leaves the orbit of the Earth looks back down on it and goes, oh my God, there's no borders. We're all human. We have to take care of this fragile blue planet or we're all dead because everything around us is empty space. So we have to take care of each other. Like, we need to deal with that. Like, that needs to be part of our movements right now before we just say, okay, Trump defeated, move on, let's disband, off we go, and wait for the next fascist to show up. All right? So that was just to give you a rationale for what we're trying to accomplish today. And what Gaye helped us to understand is that in the midst of all of this, we are trying to change the world. All of us are engaged in activities that are profoundly challenging the divisions that exist amongst us. The free store doesn't care if you're homeless or you live in a $5 million home. You can have whatever's there, right? And you can leave things for others, no matter how poor or rich you are, right? It's a common space. It's the commons. So that's what we were thinking, and we'd love to hear your thoughts at the Q&A. Just before that, we have a last video to show you from Stories from Hawaii.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me with you today. My name is Estela Chaurez. I'm the Executive Director for Faith Action for Community Equity, a multi-faith grassroots organization that brings people together to pursue justice and build stronger and more equitable communities. I stand before you not only as an advocate, but as a person of faith, grounded in the belief that every human being carries inherent dignity, worth, and sacred value. It is from that foundation that we support Oahu Rapid Response Coalition. At its heart, ORRC is about moral responsibility. Across all faith traditions in Hawaii, we are taught that how we treat the most vulnerable reflects who we are as a people. We are called to welcome the stranger, protect the neighbor, and stand witness to justice. That word witness is central. ORRC does not interfere with law enforcement. We do not obstruct or impede. What we do is bear witness. We show up, we observe, and we document. And in doing so, we send a clear message to our community who is watching and cares. Why is that necessary? Because without documentation, truth can be distorted. Without evidence, false narratives can take hold. And without witnesses, injustice can operate in the shadows. The record we create informs our community, so people are not left to fear or be in uncertainty. It can serve as evidence in a court of law, and just as importantly, in the court of public opinion. Truth needs witnesses, or it gets to be rewritten. And from a faith perspective, truth is sacred. Justice requires truth, and love of neighbor demands that we do not look away. That is why ORRC has built a system, a hotline for reporting ICE activity, a trained call team to assess those reports, and rapid response teams who can go on site to observe and document when needed. But the system only works if the community is part of it. We need people across Oahu to save the hotline number, as we've heard before. We need volunteers willing to be trained and to respond. We need eyes and ears in every neighborhood, not to create fear, but to ensure transparency and accountability. This is not about division. This is about responsibility. And the best way to preserve it is to document. ORRC is our community saying, we will not turn away. We will stand together peacefully, lawfully, and faithfully. And so I invite all of you to join us, save the hotline number, get trained, stay informed, because our faith calls us not to just believe in justice, but to show up for it. Thank you.
Before we get to our Q&As, I would like to make sure that we take full advantage of the wealth of experience, knowledge, and action that is seated at all of these tables here. So if someone, Sergio, would you mind coming up and just saying for a couple of minutes what ACLU is up to these days and how you're protecting us?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sergio Alquabilia. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the ACLU of Hawaii. And we're really grateful to stand together with all the different groups here with J20 and for everyone that's been involved in this work. At the ACLU, so our theory of change is we have three main areas that we need to win. We need to win in the courts, we need to win at the legislature, and we need to win on the streets. In the courts, we've on the immigration side, we're doing habeas petitions to try to get people out of the detention center if they're being held unlawfully. We have some First Amendment issues as well. We're trying to protect voting rights with coming elections. At the legislature, we're together with HCIR and the Legal Clinic with a campaign for immigrant justice to get some of these bills passed to protect our immigrant community. Some of those are no secret police, making sure that those detained know their rights in a language that they understand. There's a few more, and Andrew's kind of the expert on that. And on the streets, it's been a pleasure just organizing with some of the different groups here and supporting the different work that's been happening with Indivisible. We've held a few of the No Dictators rallies. Grateful to support the great work that Gaye's doing with Rapid Response Coalition, and just really grateful to be in solidarity with everyone here. We can't all do it alone. I think collectively our power is really as a group, and this is how we defeat fascism and really what this administration is all about. Our organization, we are nonpartisan, so whether it's this administration or the one after that, we're here to make sure that people's civil rights are protected, no matter what party.
Thank you, Sergio.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew, and I'm a policy and communication specialist at Hawaii Coalition for Immigrants' Rights. Originally from Ukraine, and I came here after the full invasion when Russia invaded in Ukraine in 2022. Thank you. Shortly about myself, I'm the guy who was in revolution in Ukraine in 2004 as a kid and in 2013 as a student, and one of the first who was fighting against the Russian dictatorship in Ukraine. And here, I'm working with people to teach them how to protect themselves with raising their voices when you support it or in opposition something, because the way where you get in dictatorship, it's when people forget that they have a voice and they can stand for whatever they believe. So with that, what are we working in Hawaii Coalition for Immigrants' Rights? We have a campaign for immigrants bills that actually 19 bills pass all the two chambers, and right now we are working on the conference, getting the committees. And most of the bills are actually, because I'm like kind of brand new in that, but I know in previous year, last year, most of the bills are just died. And this year, it's everything changed, a lot of things changed, and people support us a lot. And we're trying to consolidate more people with us to raise their voice, show up, testify. In online, in person, doesn't matter, it's all voices count. Thank you.
I suspect a bunch of you were among the 25,000 people who showed up across the state of Hawaii for No Kings. Good job. And in spite of the bomb threat, we think we still had 12,000 people here at the Capitol. That's a fabulous turnout. Thank you very much. Indivisible is really about taking action. We partner with the policy experts like Sergio and HCIR, and we don't create the policy. We have the grassroots folks that we can call upon to show up. And we now have, I can never remember if it's 13 or 14 chapters across the state. And that gives us agency, and it's showing, and it's working. So our job is to hold elected officials accountable. And that's what we're focusing on. So I would say that coming up, the big thing that I think we're very excited about is SB 2471. I wish that bill had a name instead of just a number. What do I call it? What should I call it, Marlene? The work about how to get rid of Citizens United on a state level. Is that a fair explanation? It's in conference. It's in conference right now. Marlene over there has been tracking this bill and done an outstanding job. She really should give her. She's done a superb job. So stay tuned for that. We may need you to show up at the Capitol. We may need you to make some calls. Hawaii would be the first state to pass a state law with this workaround regarding Citizens United. Now, of course, it's going to get challenged to the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter. We need to pass it anyway. So be ready to take action on that one. Indivisible is also very interested in replacing Ed Case. He doesn't really work for his constituents. We've got some information. A lot of people have no idea why we say that. So there's some very excellent information over there. Go ahead and talk to folks. It's also on our website. It's kind of mind-boggling when you understand his voting record. It's mind-boggling. So I suggest you get over there and get a copy of that. And of course, postcarding is happening, but I want to say something else that's happening. If you listen to Indivisible National Calls, they're every Thursday morning. They keep talking about building muscle, whether it's the May Day protests or working with, partnering with any of these organizations. Getting through the elections, and Indivisible, I think, is close to 200,000 pieces of mail to swing states with our postcarding volunteers, which is, of course, cut across all the chapters. Getting through the election is the first step. Our goal is on January 3rd to get these guys sworn in. So the shenanigans that are gonna happen after the election and between then and January 3rd, we need to be paying attention to that. Hawaii is voting by mail, but we don't know what's happening. We are Indivisible is paying attention to that. So please stay tuned, and I'm sure with all our partners, you're gonna hear a lot about it. But the goal isn't just November, guys. The goal is January 3rd, 2027, voting, what's the word I'm looking for? Swearing in a new House of Representatives and taking the Senate. That's the goal, January 3rd. So we're gonna need everybody. We're gonna need to build that muscle, and go to indivisiblehawaii.org. Over here are Marlene and Marguerite from the Honolulu chapter, if you want to find out what's going on in Honolulu. But thank you all for everything you do to protect Hawaii and democracy with aloha. Thank you.
Aloha. I go by Vol or Vern. Either is fine. I'm with General Strike in 5051. We're a combination of the organizations. We're taking different information and different resources from both of these national organizations, but we are our own independent group. We are a grassroots organization. We are also not affiliated with any type of nonprofit. Everything we do is also volunteer-based. We are focused on a bunch of different issues, considering we are a combination of organizations. We're just devoted in general to the liberation of all marginalized people and systems of oppression, right? That is what we're focused on right now. We are at a limited capacity, and we've been really excited about our arts and activism series that we're trying to push forward. We have different local artists who have volunteered to help people engage with political art. A lot of us have abandoned any creative outlets that we've had because of capitalism and the push towards productivity. So our workshop series With this series, we aim to celebrate our amazing local artists, educate the community about enduring social injustices, help people reconnect with their often forcefully abandoned creativity, engage in transformative and collaborative storytelling, and harness the truly transformative power of art and community. So if you're interested in doing any of that kind of work, if you're an artist, would like to help facilitate a workshop, if you want to just go and stretch your bones and listen, that also works. If you're interested in learning more about our group and what our values are, we created this little handy pamphlet that kind of explains stuff. So if you open it up, on one side we have our values and what we get from the 5051 chapter. On the other side, what we get from the general strike, and then a combination of values. We are active on a few different social media sites. You'll see us working a lot on Instagram. If you want to get involved with our Signal chat, that you'll see a lot of us there. If you want to get even more involved with us, we have a vetting process. We welcome any type of person that is interested in also sustaining this work. We are looking to expand our efforts into building something that will make us sustain an actual general strike. Thanks everyone.
I'm Carrie from ORRC. I'm the volunteer management lead. Like Nandita said, we are the new kids on the block. We launched in December of last year, so we've only been around for a few months. What do? We're a group of people, coalition of volunteers who are from every walk of life, nurses, teachers, doctors, lawyers, and what we're trying to do is build a community, and a community who knows their rights, a community who looks out for each other. And so one of the things we do is we educate the public about your rights. We provide training on what to do if you see ICE, how to react if you encounter ICE. We operate a hotline that we're hoping to get ready to have 24/7. So if you see ICE, you call that number. We will verify if it is an actual ICE sighting, and then we will dispatch our rapid response team to the site to make sure that we are recording. We don't want to intervene. We don't want to interfere. We just want to be there to hold ICE accountable, take video, document, and basically let them know that we're here and we're watching them. We want eyes and ears on every corner of the island to be able to put them on notice that we are watching them. And yeah, that's basically what we do is we're trying to build a community of people who know their rights and who want to look out for one another. So if you're interested in joining us, if you want to join the hotline, if you want to be a rapid responder, come see us back at the table. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz with Refuse Fascism. I want to thank J20 for hosting tonight's awesome event. Refuse Fascism was actually part of J20, Trump 1.0. For people who aren't familiar with Refuse Fascism, it's a national organization. We do have an active chapter here. We've been active since it was formed in 2016. At that time in 2016, a lot of people said, hey, I don't think you guys should be saying the F word. That's like turning people off, and that's just a little too much. Here we are, 2026. There's no arguing. This is fucking fascism. Straight up. It's fascism. So, I encourage people to be part of Refuse Fascism. Our uniting slogan is, Trump must go now. Trump must go now.
Trump must go now.
That's right. So check out refusefascism.org. Like I said, it's a national organization. There's many, many resources that are available online. Everyone can be an activist and an organizer. There's also weekly podcasts from Refuse Fascism that get into many, many different issues, including immigration, including the rule of law, war on Iran, militarism, what have you. Check it out. On Friday, May 1st, Refuse Fascism is uniting with people all across the country, calling for May Day Strong. We will be at the state capitol Friday, May 1st, 4 p.m. Come join us. Come check it out. Once again, sign up at the table if you don't already have our information. I want to say one last thing. You know, what's happening in Iran is outrageous. The president said openly, threatened to wipe out an entire civilization. Think about that. It's mind-boggling. But like yesterday's insanity becomes today's normality. And this is no longer acceptable. And frankly, you know, far too many people in the United States, there's more complaints about the price of gas. Well, I get it. I'm a preschool teacher, so I get it. The price of gas affects us all. But in the context of what is happening, we are murdering people in Iran, and the president is openly bragging about it. You know, silence really is complicity. It really is at this point. You know, millions of people hate what Trump stands for. Millions of people don't support what's happening. But too many people are silent. Too many people are complicit. We can't do that anymore. So be out with Refuse Fascism in the streets. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Thank you.
Just an announcement. I'm representing the Unitarians of Hawaii. We are having an event on Sunday, in case you haven't heard about it already. You and everyone you know is invited to our service on Sunday morning. We're going to have the topic, is revolutionary optimism, the role of faith in radical politics. This message will be delivered by Zach Fraser, who is a well-known activist in the state of Hawaii, particularly on the island. And we are going to have a talk back after his message. We're also going to be offering bento lunch boxes in between, free. So if you come to our service and listen to Zach's message and hang out a little bit afterwards, we'll have bento boxes for you, and then we'll have an opportunity to all talk back. Thank you. Where? That's a good question. Thank you, yes. It's the First Unitarian Church, 2500 Pali Highway. And let's see, what else can I tell you? You know, it's an old White House, 10 o'clock a.m. service, which will be over about before 11. And then we'll have our bento box while we're doing our talk back, story circle.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I think that's great.
Okay, I didn't leave anything else out.
We have a few minutes left for your comments and feedback and input and thoughts and ideas and opportunities to tell us what you're all doing. Did I see a hand here? Come on up.
It was kind of sparked by your talk, Bridget, but it's kind of for everyone. And I guess it's sort of around like practical thoughts in organizing, navigating the sort of tension in sort of anti-colonial or decolonizing movements that, how do I say this, like kind of can have a tendency towards, or there's a temptation to start to define, or to fight a nationalism with another nationalism, to start to like attempt to define an in-group and lean on these sort of nationalistic myths that start to like look for sort of ethnic or religious or even like genetic purity in efforts to sort of protect against like this encroaching colonial other. And like I know that's like ideologically kind of like just like a risk, but I guess questions or thoughts around like practical ways of sort of navigating that tension in organizing spaces that are focused on decolonizing. I don't know. Yeah.
Bridget has a good idea, which is let's collect a bunch of things so that there's plenty of time for people to engage. And Gaye tells me that she has an announcement to make as well.
The Filipino Community Center in Waipahu has an annual event, the Filipino Fiesta. It's happening next Saturday, May 2nd, from 10 to 6. They have food vendors, and they say, like, around-the-clock entertainment. It's like this family event, and it's attended by 12,000 people every year. This year, they're scared that ICE will show up. Can you all go and be there for them? That's all. May 2nd, 10 to 6.
Yeah. The Filipino community is being heavily targeted by ICE. People from ORRC went there yesterday to do some training for observers, how to handle ICE presence. But there's going to be a lot of people there, and there's going to be a lot of need for a lot of eyes, particularly if you've been trained. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
I think we have taken a fundamental step backwards from that with the dismantling of U.S. aid and the elimination of foreign assistance, and that that is being replaced by the very small amount of foreign assistance that is left is transactional in nature now, and absolutely has racial components to how that is being distributed and used. And what's disturbing to me is that seemingly the vast majority of Americans support eliminating foreign assistance, which really goes against the one world, we're all human perspective, but also the fundamental founding principles of our country. And so I think there's a shift in core values in the U.S., and I don't know how and when that started exactly, but I do think it's part of the underlying reason that all of these things came into play and are accepted. I don't know, perhaps, the degradation of analytics within the educational curriculum over the last few decades has something to do with that, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts on how and why our value system changed to the point where I'm not sure that it's going to be reversible, at least anytime soon.
I was wondering if both these professors, or all of you, do you have YouTube channels or anything like that we can listen to what you have to say? Because I think being able to listen to something like that, you can pause it, and ruminate, would be a great resource. So just a suggestion or question.
Thanks. I don't think any of us have a YouTube channel, but Malcolm is recording this for Hawaii J20, and on Hawaii J20's website, you can view the recording and then do that pause and replay thing as often as you'd like. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions about nationalism.
But also that I think that if you Google any of us, there's more than you want.
Yeah, that's true. In all formats. So decolonization can we decolonize with nationalism? How did we shift towards a society that votes for Trump? Any thoughts, questions?
Probably I'll go backwards. We do have a podcast. I've got, if you look for Migration Unboxed, and the first one in that series is me and Nandita speaking. So, yeah. I also feel like when you were asking about one world, I mean, there is one world for military spending, of course. And I think that, but I also think that there is this huge fear that there isn't enough to go around. And in some ways, that's what's great about eating in public and about free source, is it kind of helps lift that fear that there isn't enough to go around. Because actually, I don't know the situation in the US, but I would say in the UK, in some ways, so if you earn, I think it's now something like $29,000 annually, you're in the top 1% of income earners. And that's not very much, even if you have free secondary education, and in the UK you have free healthcare. And I think that there is this fear that, oh my God, I'm barely getting by, and there's a whole load of people who are much worse off than me, and what happens if they all come in? Basically, I think there's that kind of like fundamental fear that we need to be addressing. And like I say, recognizing that we have to stop thinking that we're in a competition for basic resources. There is plenty to go around. It's just that these guys are taking it all for themselves. You know, it's just we're being distracted, and we're being distracted and stopped from looking up and at the ways in which we're all being robbed. In terms of the decolonization, I mean, I would say that, you know, we've already seen, and again, I refer to Nandita's book, that nationalism, you know, the hopes of nationalism and national identity as presenting a route forward out of decolonizing, out of colonialism, has not worked. Basically, it's resulted in another bunch of rulers who maybe look a bit the same and maybe speak the same language, still exploiting the majority of the population. And I would say in the place where I know about most, which is what was Burma and is now called Myanmar, there was a very strong anti-colonial movement that was highly nationalistic and that was also very anti-Indian. So there was a lot of Indian in inverted commas migrants, although there'd been Indians in inverted commas in Burma for since forever. There were a lot of, but when the British colonized Burma, they brought in a lot of Indian workers who were utterly scapegoated, massacred, and now we see what's happening with the Rohingya people, who are depicted as being foreigners, migrants, and Indians, or Bangladeshis now. So I think we've already gone round that trip. I don't think we have to go round it again to not see that this is not going to offer a way of liberation. And I think that's more or less it.
Can I clarify my question? I guess I'm not so much asking whether or not it works. I think you're right that it's like clear it doesn't. I think it does, though, continually emerge in these spaces. And so I guess I'm more asking around like practical brass tacks tips, I guess, or techniques that you can use in decolonizing organizing spaces to sort of mitigate that risk and manage those conversations. Because I think especially here, it's a very powerful part of the conversation around decolonization, and like a challenge I think a lot of people are dealing with is sort of like, how do we continue to decolonize while kind of mitigating the risk of forming a new nationalism as a result?
Sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, no, I get that. And it's hard for me to say because, like I say, each place has its own contingencies. And I feel like there are people here who are better able to answer that question. But what I would say is that if I can think of, you know, not a parallel, but the ways in which we are taught to kind of view that what's bad for you is going to be good for me, and what's good for me is going to be bad for you, which I think is the kind of underpinning logic. And I think in order to mitigate that, we have to first of all like appreciate where people are coming from, rather than start off by saying what I just said. You know, I mean that doesn't mean that what I just said doesn't guide how you manage these situations, but I think that just sometimes I think being able to listen to people and hear what their anxieties and hurts are is a good starting point. Like, I think it is important to listen, even if I know that fundamentally I'm going to disagree with what comes out of your mouth. We need to be able to kind of make the common ground between us, and that's just a very hokey, I'd never heard of that word, thing to say, but I think, you know, a very abstracted thing to say, because I don't know the contingencies of what it's like here, so you two are probably better able to answer that than me.
Gaye, do you want to answer any of those questions, Gaye? Why we have this culture?
I think people have been seduced to really like simple answers and easy answers.
that there's something is gonna save us, and it's just, as we know, it's just never that way. So, as it's demonstrated right now, we are the only people that's gonna save us, and none of these problems are not real. The eggs are not too expensive because there are too many chickens at the same time. I mean, none of it makes any sense to me. And for me, because I'm a maker, I work through this through eating in public. And it's our problem is abundance, is not scarcity. There's just too much stuff. In front of our house right now are like 3 cases of peanut butter. There's like 5 cases of chicken soup. What's going on here? You know, so we have an overabundance, but we're only talking about scarcity. So, you know, I look in the trash and then people are just throwing everything away. So I think that we just need to just look at what's in front of us and solve those problems instead of just thinking that there's some easy way, something to scapegoat, or some concept of like, oh, if we just have a different nation, queer nation, it's not going to save us. Because there'll be rich queers and there'll be the other queers.
Okay, I think we're ready to call it a night. Thank you so much for being here. And we will see you next time.